one screw. One bloody screw. It took about an hour to fit. Everything else was a breeze. Sort of. That could have been a lot easier. This is a new one, a little lion. I will carefully... Bugger. Looking very close to a working 3D printer. Superb. Today, we're building the loveboard assembly and fitting that. We're fitting the swing arm and routing the Hotend cables and the Bowden tube. We're fitting the part cooling fan and the Hotend itself. And finally, we're plugging everything in. Ouch. If you watch this video, it may save you an hour of building, so grab a beverage and get comfortable. I'm Chris, this is Mr. T. Welcome to Coding with My Dogs. So, for step one today, we are going to be preparing the mounts for the loveboard and getting that ready to be installed into the printer. We've got these two plastic parts. They have these channels on the top that will guide the cable through. And we're also going to need the main cable and obviously some screws and nuts. And we're going to need the loveboard. So this neat little board has this connector here that will go between itself and the main board of the printer. And that means that basically all of the little bits that go with the print head, like the extruder motor, various fans, various thermistors, load cell, filament sensor, all of those bits can be replaced just by unplugging from this board, which is connected to the extruder itself, which means you're not dismantling the entire printer to replace something like maybe the Hotend thermistor. And that has been a common issue with things like the Mark III, where something goes wrong with the print, the hot filament builds up and goes all over the cables for the thermistor, and basically when you try and pull that cooled filament off, then the thermistor breaks. And to replace the thermistor, they're really cheap. It doesn't cost much to get a new one. You can keep a spare in place if you want, but to replace it, you're basically dismantling the entire printer. You've got to undo all of the cables that go with that extruder all the way back to the main board and replace it that way. So this is definitely an advantage to have a nice little thing like this in place. Very, very useful.
Yeah, Mr. T. Oh, you've noticed that I'm filming. Okay. Mr. T. Mr. T. What is going on, Mr. T? I haven't even set up the clapperboard yet. But you still came in. Huh? You still came in. Do you want cuddles, huh? Do you want cuddles? What's going on here?
So first off, we want to install a nut here in this position on the loveboard mount, and then another one here on the other side. And then the other piece for the loveboard mount gets these two nuts here and here, and one more on the back side here. So let's get those in place. So first up, putting this square nut in here. If we can get it through. Well, that's pretty loose, actually. Be careful with that one. That's going to drop out again very, very easily. Let's take a little bit of blue tack and put it there for the moment. Hopefully that will remind us to be careful as well. Next one goes in here. little bit more resistance on that one, which is good. It's going to stay in by itself, hopefully. It's a little bit skew in there, so I'm just going to use this screwdriver to try and pull it in a little bit. That's worked fine. This next piece, we've got two going in, one here, one here. Get in there. Right. Okay, again, those need a little bit of alignment, so let's find our screwdriver. Well, that looks just about perfect. And one more on this side. And that's aligned nicely. Doesn't need any help from the screwdriver. So now we're going to mount the love board into its holder. We just need to have this one screw inserted here. And we're just pushing the board in like so, using this end of the cable. And then we're plugging it in, obviously, to the large socket on the love board there behind the love board mount. And then these steps are quite important because there's only so much length to this cable, and you cannot afford to have any slack anywhere. So we want to keep it tight around the cable, around the connector there, and then we're bending it around through this gap like so, round behind the back of the board, across here, and then making sure that this fits nicely inside the cable guide. We need to fit these two screws in here because they're going to be covered over by the other side of the love board cable guide. And then we're going to fit this with these screws here and over here. And making sure that this fits snugly like so, but is not pinching any of the cable or the cable sleeve. Let's get that in place. So now we have our love board. This is a really nice addition for the Nextruder. So with the Mark III's, basically all of the things like the Hotend heater, the thermistor, the filament runout detector, all of those cables ran all the way back to the main board, and basically meant if you needed to replace any of those things, you're effectively taking the entire printer apart, which was always a major faff. In the end, I put in my own connectors for the Hotend thermistor and for the Hotend heater so that they could be disconnected and replaced. But that was always tricky because there wasn't really a lot of space for things like those connectors to go without actually potentially getting in the way of the print. So having something like this makes things so much easier. It's trivial to just unplug one of the things like the thermistor, dismantle it, put a replacement in, plug it in, and you're done. So yeah, looking forward to that. So we're taking this. We're taking this piece, which is the mount. The connectors go face down here, and we're aiming to put our little black round-headed screw in there like that, just to hold our love board in place. And of course, we don't want to do this up too firmly. We don't want to risk cracking this little circuit board. Yeah, that's perfect. Just lose that scrap of blue tack. We have our cable bundle. We're using the end that doesn't have a QR code on it. So not that end, this end. And we want to be plugging into this obviously large connector here. In that fashion, we twist this cable half a turn. Maybe more than half a turn, bringing it back over here. And then we want to route it into that channel like so. It's quite a lot of loose cables. So yeah, for me, that's about 2 turns to get that into the shape where it's not going to fall apart. Hopefully you can still see this, bringing it round here like that. So through this little channel here and then into this channel. And we've got more than half of the braided part still sticking out. So it's saying the end of the textile sleeve should align here with the end of the plastic part. So I need to try and bring that whole thing up a little bit if I can. It's a little bit too much. Okay, that's about it there. So we're nice and tight around that way. Cable's coming through there and then holding that in place like so. So as always with these things, there's not a lot of length available for these cables, so they need to be as tight as they possibly can along here. And then obviously, as we found, we can't assume that the textile sleeve will be in exactly the right place. We've moved that back a bit and that looks good to me. So we can hold it there. So whilst we've got this in place, we need to put the 2 screws that are required in here. Okay, they're just loose, so they're going to screw into another part later, I'm imagining. So they just go in like so. Now we're taking our cover. That needs to go over the top of all of this. And we need to make sure that we're not pinching any cables when we do so. And then we've got these 2 N310 screws going in like that. So this is closed up correctly. It's not pinching the cable. I can remove my little bit of blue tack now, seeing as we're seated into that nut. Both sides done up. Hopefully that's the cables tucked away as well as they can be. Still a tiny little bit of length there, but I don't want to stress this connector too much. So hopefully that's good enough. Keep saying things like hopefully that's good enough, and then those words come back to bite me later, but we will see. So next up is installation of the swing arm assembly. So we need these couple of screws and this, what do we call it? So we need these couple of screws and this M54 adapter, which basically screws into the top of the heatsink and gives us a path that the filament is going to go in through. Bowden tube and the swing arm assembly itself, along with these 5 fabric cable ties. And those fabric cable ties are basically all stuck together in the box. So it might look like one very thick cable tie, but actually you've got 5. You just need to separate them all. So this is the Bowden tube guide, which fits over the top of the Nextruder assembly. And this is the cable clamp, which fits where the cable goes out the back of the printer. So first up, we need to install the cable clamp onto the cable like this, being very careful not to snap where the two sides meet together. It's a fairly robust part, but you have to be a bit careful. It says in the instructions to leave 5 centimeters here, but many comments say you should be more like 10 to 15 centimeters to make sure that you've got enough length to reach the bit where it needs to be plugged into the main board. So yeah, be careful with that. It's saying to put the glove board assembly down onto the box on the bed there, just to keep it out of the way. And then the cables themselves are feeding up and round the back of this XY gantry. So there's a small gap in the corner there. These need to come down through there. And this gets clamped on somewhere out of sight here, which we'll see in a minute, I guess. So yeah, we're putting a screw through both sides of the cable clip here, and then into this hole, which is on the mount for the Y-axis motor in the corner there. And the screw goes in like so. Let's do that. Okay, I can see immediately that this one is going to be a faff. So first up, we need to get this cable clip onto the cable without breaking it. It's quite stiff. I'm just quite worried about doing that, but let's just go for it. There we go. And we want about 5 centimeters from the end there, which I think is roughly what we've got. Wiggle it around a bit, try and get the jaws of that to close up. Now, I need to get it in here. For starters, I don't know if I'm going to be able to film it without getting my hands completely in the way. And also it's just, again, these fans are in the way. Y-axis motor is obviously in the way. We can't do much about that. You know, maybe it could have been done before we fully mounted this gantry, but it wasn't. First, we need to feed this down behind the frame of the XY gantry, like so. I feel like there's a flat part and a more bulbous part, and we really want, obviously this is going down that way, so we want the flat part to be the other side, I think.
Hi, it's Chris from the future. Ignore what Chris from the present just said. The screw goes into the side where there's a recess for the screw, otherwise it doesn't fit properly, as you're about to hilariously find out. Smell you later.
Again, keeping it 5. centimeters or so. I'm just wiggling it to try and make sure they're as close together as they can be. I'm going to try and bring this cable down from behind. That takes it roughly to the point where we want to be. Got a 10mm screw to go through it. Okay, so that might help us a bit. Once we screw that in, it should hopefully close the jaws up a little bit. I'm hoping to get it protruding through just a little bit to help us actually find the thread. But it isn't really. This is going to be a nightmare. As with many of these operations, you cannot see what you're doing. You can't get in there. You can't see it. I swear this section just could have been designed so that maybe, you know, we build this and fix this onto the gantry just before you put it in place. I don't want to remove the fans again because they're all plugged in now. It feels like it's going in, but it doesn't go in. Is that screw centered properly? I mean, as far as I can see, that bolt is in the right place. The nut, I mean. Oh, see, this is what I'm worried about. These wires are starting to get snagged and they're going to rub up and down against this metal as I'm trying to put this damn thing into place. No, 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 no. Need to try and get the whole thing closer to me. Okay, I've brought this whole thing closer into me now. You may or may not be able to see this on the camera, but I just have to be able to get in close to it. So it's exactly the right place, but it's just not going in. Okay, I'm just going to try and send another M3 screw into there just to make sure this damn thing is aligned, and it is. So I think there's more space available behind that nut. So I'm going to replace our M310 screw with an M314 screw that I had in my own parts. That little extra bit of length will give us something to poke out behind that we can then use to locate the nut and avoid all of this faff. So we get about 4 or 5 millimeters there that we didn't have before. That should enable me to locate the hole that it's supposed to be going into there. Again, ignoring the manual, using my own parts, I've managed to get that damn screw in place. Okay. So reading some of the instructions, some of the comments, they're suggesting that actually this part is asymmetrical in the opposite way to what you think it should be. So if I mount it the other way round, there's actually a recess for the screw head, which is what we should have been doing with that 10 millimeter screw. So, against my better judgment, I'm taking this back out again. Yep, as we can see, there is a recess there. I get rid of that screw. I will carefully try. So we'll put that back on again. This side will be the one that faces the back. This side is where the screw will go. So as you can see, that recesses, and that means that we have a good amount of screw coming out the back. And that makes things an awful lot easier. I also included a little bit more of the sheath through the cable clamp as well, because some of the comments were saying it's actually more like 10 to 15 centimeters that you need to give yourself sufficient length to get these things through to the back panel and plugged in. So we've done that. Yeah. So that could have been a lot easier if I just noticed specifically here. You know, you can see that it has that recess, but just instinctively you think the flatter section would be the bit that goes up against there. But no, you need the rounded section here, goes towards the back, and then this front piece has that recess for the screw head so that we can actually get the screw in place and have enough protruding through the back that we can actually easily locate our screw hole there. You live and you learn. Right, let's see what's next. So next up, we are attaching the love board to the back of the Nextruder. We're lining up this hole to the top of the hole on the heatsink, which accepts the filament path. And then we've got that little bit to screw into there, which I assume we can see next. Yep. So that little bit screws in. It's got a hexagonal shape there, and one of the little tools that comes with the kit has got the relevant size to tighten up there. So we'll use that. And then finally, we need to use the Allen key in this case to get through and do up the two screws that we covered over with this back plate earlier on, and that will attach everything together nicely. Taking our love board assembly here, we want to fit that over the back of the Nextruder assembly itself. Something's blocking me there, I don't know what. And we're positioning so that this hole lines up, which it has done. I need to take this little adapter, which is going to feed in the filament, and screw that in through there into the top of the heat shield if I can. Can't quite see what I'm doing as always. As always, that's not getting a grip. Of course not. Putting firm pressure on to the top of this here, just to make sure that goes in. I think it has now. Now we can tighten that in using one of those spanners, but what I'd like to do first is, if I can get the screwdriver at it, which I can't, just move this forward a bit. Just get through to the screw heads at the back here, which we can't reach with this bit. Right. Just get those done up. Like that. And we can just lightly tighten this one here. Don't put too much pressure on it. That should do us. Next up, we need to mount the swing arm assembly itself. To the back right corner, and just attaching it with those two round-headed screws. Okay, next we are mounting this swing arm. That's going to go up here. It's going to hold all of that cable and Bowden tube assembly for the Nextruder head out of the way. So I'm going to just put in one screwdriver there initially, and it's going to fall out. So let's get that in place. Try and get the swing arm out of the way so you can actually see what I'm doing, hopefully. I think both cameras are going to be blocked. Get the first screw loosely in. That's our swing arm swinging. Now we are attaching our cable assembly to this first point on the swing arm. So the swing arm, as is shown up here, has these little recesses in it, which will help keep these fabric cable ties in place. So it's just a matter of locating the cable tie like that, making sure the sort of Velcro-y side as opposed to the soft side is facing us, with this slot down at the bottom. Pull it through as tight as we can there, making sure it stays within that recess on the swing arm mount, and then tie it as tight as we can just to keep the cable in place and make sure that over time this fabric cable tie doesn't start to slide up and down on the swing arm. It should stay in its place because of that little recess, as long as it's tight enough. The cable mounts to the front of this swing arm. And then we're going to take one of these fabric ties that fits into this slot here that you can see, goes around and then through like so. Tighten that up. Make sure the cable stays there, make sure that stays within its little slot. And then just tighten it, wrap it around on itself. Like so. This is tighten as much as possible. This doesn't really feel tight enough to me. Yeah, it's a bit tighter. So next up, we are taking our Bowden tube and pushing it through the tube guide like so. Obviously, this tube guide is a printed part, so may take a little bit of pushing to just get it all the way through. And we need to have about 1 centimeter protruding from the end here. That then gets pushed down over the piece that we just installed on the top of the Nextruder assembly. And that should click down nicely with the Bowden tube going down into that collet at the top of the Nextruder. And this doesn't quite connect all the way down. The reason for that is this is designed to actually swing left and right as this print head moves up and down, forward and backwards. So there needs to be some flexibility there, and obviously we don't want this sort of grinding up against the top of the housing. So there is a gap there. It's supposed to be there. That's fine. For the next trick, we have got our little Bowden tube guide here. And we have our Bowden tube. This needs to go through this guide. Not necessarily easy. It's quite... The tube itself is quite slippery. You need to push it through. Now the end of this needs to protrude, they say, by 1 centimeter. So let's just pull it back a little bit like that. And then that is going into the top of this tube guide. And that seems to have done the trick. And now we attach the Bowden tube and the cable to those remaining 2 points here and here on the swing arm assembly. As it says there, the Bowden tube skips that last point because the cable is going that way and the tube needs to go this way. So that's fine. So it's just these two here, and they're connected in exactly the same manner as the first one. So then the Bowden tube comes down through this slot here on this guide piece, and then through this slot in the metal frame of the CoreXY assembly. And we have a certain amount of it coming out here, maybe about like 8 centimeters or so. Okay, so now we are guiding the Bowden tube and our cable, doing the same thing again in this next slot. Take this fabric cable tie, keep it in that little slot there. You can see it, hopefully. And that's those. So it doesn't go through this last one, just through these first two. Try and keep the length of the Bowden tube here about the same as the cable itself. And now the free end of the tube goes through this cable guide here and through this gap underneath the printer. There's not really a lot of length left on that. Hopefully that's sufficient. And this final step is to install this one and this one here. They are just free, attaching the Bowden tube to the cable itself as it swings. And they need to be about 10 centimeters from the previous one, 10 centimeters between those. They're probably going to move over time, and you'll probably be sticking your hand up into the printer from time to time to move these back into the right places relatively. But it's all just to make sure that this stuff stays together and looks neat. And then in this step, we are basically going to be moving the head forwards and backwards. So over to this corner here, making sure that this forms a sensible arc, and then moving to this corner and over to this corner, just making sure that nothing gets pinched and nothing looks incorrect. There's nothing pulling on the cables or pulling the Bowden tube back out again, and it should all just look nice. As it shows here, no tight corners, nothing being stretched. And it's saying that if anything does get stretched, you can loosen this and move this up and down. God help us if we have to do that. Hopefully we don't need to touch that ever again, that particular screw. Now the last two of these fabric ties, we want to go about 10 centimeters from the previous one, and it just goes freely around to hold the Bowden tube to the cable. That's one. Then we put the final one in here. Like that. Job done. So we want to make sure we have full and free movement of the extruder head here. If we just manually bring it back to the home position this way, we can just see that we're not stretching these too far that way, and they're not sort of ballooning out this way. That looks about right to me. And then as we move it back, and across to there, everything sort of stays relatively loose. It's not creating any tight bends or anything that's going to cause us problems. Marvelous. That's looking very close to a working 3D printer. Superb. So now we are assembling the part cooling fan. For this, we need the fan itself, this little radial fan here. And then we have this funky 3D printed part, which is designed to direct the airflow from the fan through the center of it like so, and then onto the print head out here. Obviously, we have a few screws and some nuts for this one. And first up, we are putting in the nuts into this section on this side of the printed part, and then in here on this sticky outy bit, to use the engineering term, and another on this side here. So first up, we put the fan over the end of that 3D printed part and secure it with the screw there, which is the M325 screw. So we have our really cool looking shroud, which is for the part cooling fan. So the fan itself will go in there, and then through the channel inside, it'll blow the air out over the part here. So fitting over the hot end like so. Very nice. And we need to put in 3 of the square nuts, 2 over on this side and 1 on the other side. Let's crack on with that. Need some pliers for that one, actually. With the pliers, I can get more of a grip on the outside edge, so I can stick it in a bit further without having to release it. So like this. Just use that to put it in all the way, and we can just find our little screwdriver and then just use that to make sure it's centered. I think it is, but yes, that looks good to me. And then the next one over here on this side here. Push it in. Just center it using our screwdriver like that. And then there's one more required over on this side. Let's get it in there. In you go. Come on, don't resist. Resistance is futile. I have to put quite a bit of pressure on this one. So I'll try and bring it in the rest of the way with the screwdriver, because I don't want to risk breaking this part. I think that's almost there. Just give it a little bit more of a nudge. And that's good to go. None of those are going to come falling out. So we have our little part cooling fan here. And that needs to be mounted to the end here and then screwed in. So simply a matter removing the dog hair, taking the fan, clicking it in like so, in this fashion. The hole lines up with the little nut that we put in there, and we are going to be sinking in a M325 screw. Always the wrong screwdriver bit. Again, just enough to hold. We don't want to crack the plastic of the fan. Job done. So we bring the printed part behind the Nextruder assembly, and we need to secure it in two places, here and here, with two M3x10 screws like so. Okay, so this shroud comes around the back, and I've obviously got these two holes that the screws are going to go into, and we'll use the screwdriver technique again to try and hold one of those in place. I hope this will be visible on one of the cameras. No, it's not. Can't get the screwdriver through enough for it to actually hold on, so I'll have to go one screw at a time. So bringing it back around this side first. Don't actually have room to get the screw in there. Okay. Just leave the screw balanced there, hoping it won't just fall out. And just try and get a few teeth in. Yep. Okay, maybe not. Okay, I think this nut wasn't quite seated right, so I used the pliers to just go through the hole and then against this side to just squeeze. Let me see if I can show. And just put the pliers in like that and just squeeze just to bring that nut back over. It was quite a stubborn one, and I think that's got it in place now. So let's have another try. By just undoing that. Yep, that's that one in. It's in place, but I can't get quite enough grip using the screwdriver itself here because of the kind of obtuse angle that I'm coming in at. So I will use the largest of our Allen keys. Even the Allen key doesn't fit too easily around this. Get in there. Again, it doesn't need to be super tight, but I don't want it to be loose either. I don't want it falling out over time. Let's tighten up the other one as well whilst we're here. And now we can install the Hotend itself. So we have the Hotend assembly here. That has basically got this single unit nozzle. It's got a built-in thermistor and a built-in heater block, well, heater element into the heater block. And then the heater block has this silicone sleeve around it, which looks very nice. And then we've also got these two thumb screws, which are used to hold everything in place. Mr. T, who's this? This is a new one. This is a new one, a little lion. Huh? Oh dear. Oh dear. You can't leave that lion there, can you? Hey? Funny guys. We have the Hotend for the Nextruder. The Hotend comes fitted with this 0.4mm brass nozzle. And for these Nextruders, the nozzle is actually this whole assembly here. So the filament goes through here. This is used, I guess, for contact with the heatsink to draw all the heat out at that point, making sure that we have the melt zone only in the block at the end, and we don't have melted filament coming up here. And the fact that this is one whole unit means that we don't have the issue that we used to have with needing to change nozzles whilst they were hot, so that we didn't get problems with expansion then causing the filament to leak out the back of the nozzle and go over everything. So we don't have that issue anymore. But what I want to do is to change out this nozzle now for a hardened steel Obsidian 0.6mm nozzle, which I've pre-ordered with the printer itself. I use the 0.6mm nozzle because I usually print larger sort of structural pieces, and I don't really need the precision of a 0.4mm, so prefer to get the speed that you get with a 0.6. And I like to use the Obsidian because I'm quite often printing with things like nylon or carbon fiber or polycarbonate. So that is the Obsidian nozzle. I don't know if we can pick up the difference in the nozzles by looking here. Might need to move the light a little bit. So to fit this, first of all, I've got to remove this silicone shield from around the Hotend. That comes off like that. Yeah, so I just need to hold on to this heater block with something and then unscrew the nozzle like so and bring the whole thing out. And then I can put the Obsidian one in its place. So I shall use these adjustable pliers just to grip onto the heater block like so. This is a lot easier to do when you're not worried about burning yourself at the same time. And now just move this into unscrew mode. Didn't require too much pressure just to remove it there, so I guess I need to make sure I don't use too much pressure putting the new one in. There's one out. Go in with the obsidian nozzle. Just a little bit of tension on there. Like that. I think that was about equivalent to what I used to remove it. And as I said before, because this is a whole piece, we no longer need to be worried about putting this on super tight and therefore avoiding anything leaking out, because there's no way anything can leak out. The filament, when it's in here, should still be solid. It only melts when it gets past the heatsink area and then comes into contact with this heater block, which has the heater cartridge plugged into it. And that's what generates all of the heat that's used in the 3D printer to melt the plastic. So that should be good. It doesn't need to be super tight. We just need to make sure it doesn't fall out when we're printing. And let's put that silicone shield back over the top of it. And that looks nice.
What's going on here? Captain Scrunch. Captain Scrunch. What you got? You got your little birdie? Huh? Was it a little sheep? I don't know what that one is. Okay. Bye.
So we want to start off by routing the cables, making sure they go in between the two holes that we have here for the thumb screws. And then having done that, we are screwing in the thumb screws here and here, just a few turns to hold them in place. Next up, we insert the hot end into the larger of the holes here, not the one that we previously put that little grub screw in. It's the large hole on the left side there. If there's any resistance, it might be that the thumb screws are in a little bit too tight, so you just need to loosen them a bit and keep pushing that up until we get it pretty close here. And this shows the clearances that are needed. It says about 2 millimeters. I suspect it's probably a little bit more than that, but basically you can just see that top edge of the, so it's actually the bottom end of this little copper shroud that's used to make contact between the nozzle shaft and the heatsink in the Nextruder assembly. So obviously making sure we just got a slither of that showing, and that's all we need, and that shows that the hot end is inserted correctly. Okay, so next up, we want to get these little thumb screws in place, and to do that we need to make sure the cable from this heat block fan is just slightly out of the way. The thumb screw looks like this. It's just going to go into that hole, and it's just going to go into it by a couple of turns for the moment, just so it doesn't fall out. And the same for this top one. Just a couple of turns there. So that leaves us with our hot end to install. So here's a hot end. We're coming in at it seems to be like a 45-degree angle, or an angle that sort of aligns this heat block with the shape of the part cooling fan shroud there. We need to make sure we go up into the correct hole, which is this one. Up past those thumb screws. It says we want to just have barely 2 millimeters showing. I'll be a bit careful of these cables. With that pressed in place, I can now just do up these thumb screws tight. Going quite a way. Okay. So on the inset picture, it shows just a little tiny fragment of that sort of brass collet that meets with the heatsink. Just a tiny fragment of that showing. And then maybe like 3 or 4 times more of the top of, it says the brass collar for the nozzle itself, but of course ours is this obsidian one. So I think we've nailed it. I think that's the right position. It looks good to me. And now we can start plugging things in. We take the NTC thermistor lead, just put a little bit of a bend in it and plug it into this connector on the top right. Well, the top right of this left section of connectors on that love board. And then the hot end fan cable goes into this bottom left connector here. Next up, we're routing the 2 sets of wires coming from the hot end itself, again through here, and then it's hard to see in this diagram, but it's through the little channel that is on this piece here that we struggled to fit a while ago. So there's 2 little channels fitted into that. The one channel that we already routed cables through, and then there's a channel on this side, and we need to put through the hot end thermistor and the heater cables as well. They need to go through there. And then firstly, the hot end thermistor comes in and gets plugged into this top left connector here. And then the hot end heater cable gets routed around like so. And it plugs into this black connector right up above everything else here on the love board. Now we're going to route the cable from the part cooling fan through this little narrow gap here underneath the love board. We're going to manage the cable a bit, bending it up and back down again, and then plugging it into this center left position. And at this stage, we have all of the connectors on this side of the board plugged in. Hot end fan, part cooling fan. That was the Hotend thermistor. There's the NTC thermistor behind it there. There's the Hotend heater here. And then obviously the main connector that takes our cable all the way back to the back part of the printer. Now we're up above. We're taking in the connector from the extruder stepper motor and plugging it into this socket up here. And on this side, we have the load cell cable, which comes in and plugs into this top connector. And then filament sensor cable comes in and plugs into the bottom connector here. Okay, we are plugging things in. So we have our NTC thermistor cable here. That's coming up and that's plugging into this top right socket here. Is it sideways? I think it's sideways. Let's look at the diagram. Yeah, on the diagram, the little tab on the connector is facing this way. So, yeah, I think it goes sideways, not top to bottom. That's the problem. There you go. Just put it in the right direction. It is easy. Let's do some cable management, try and bend the cables up there a little bit. So the other one from this side is the heatsink fan, the front fan here, which is this one. And again, that goes with the little clip facing towards the left. Like this. Very simple. Okay. Next up, we're wanting to take the Hotend thermistor through our little cable clip there. I don't know if that's visible. Might need a bit more light on it. So that little cable clip there that we struggled with the other side of, we need to take the thermistor and the heating element cables. They need to pass through there. So let's put that in like so. So first up, we take this and then connect it to this top connector here. Again, the little clip facing out this way. Goes in like so. Push the cables up a little bit. You stay there. And then same deal with the heater element cable. We just want to push it inside that little cable clip. And then we want to route it round and it goes into this connector up at the top. He did a bit of jiggling and then just push it in till it clicks like so. Make sure it's still properly within its cable guide, which I don't think it quite was. The cables look reasonably nicely managed there now. So the cable here for our part cooling fan comes through this little gap here at the bottom. And it is plugging into that middle socket that we can see there. Again, just keeping it facing towards the outside. Plugs in very easily. And we just want to fold the cable up a little bit to manage it. Stuff it up in there a little bit like so. And that looks kind of nice to me, even if I say so myself. Nextruder motor cable going into this plug at the top. The tab on this cable facing forwards. So, just like that. Oh, isn't that straightforward? On the other side here, we have the load cell cable and filament connector. So the load cell cable with the multiple colors plugs into the upper connector. The filament sensor that is just gray, that plugs into the lower connector. It looks like the clips face towards the front. So we have this one here, which is the load cell connector. Needs a bit of a stretch. Let's try and do this one first. That's the filament sensor. That can connect into the bottom one like so. And the load cell sensor is a little bit of a stretch. Going into the top connector somehow. And that's into. Marvelous. That is everything connected. Now that we've finished plugging everything in, we can prepare these two covers that go over the cables and the love board assembly at the sides of the Nextruder. And there's a few screws as well for that, obviously. We're going to guide the main cable out through this hole here to the back part of the printer. We're going to secure this right side cover onto the Nextruder using these two M3x6 screws. And the instructions are saying that we need to make sure we don't snag or pinch any of the wires that are behind this. On the left side of the Nextruder, we need to do a little bit of cable management, make sure that all of the cables are nicely, snugly fitted into this little area here, keeping this bottom area clear, keeping them back away from where the heatsink goes through there, and nothing sticking out the top, making sure that this cable is routed nicely through that little notch there. And then once that's done, we're putting this assembly onto the side. You can see it sort of fits around that little notch. I think there's a little nub there that goes into a hole on this piece. So probably best to align that first, put that in place, and securing it here with the M3x10 screw. So now it's just a matter of putting these covers over the top. Let's do this side first. Keeps all the cables nicely in place and make sure we don't end up snagging prints or anything with our cables as things start to come loose over time. That's that one done. The This one's extra tricky. We want to make sure we're not snagging any of these little cables on the side of this piece. Now there seems to be a little hole that this seats into, I think. And then the other part is up here. There's a hole that we need to sink our screw into eventually. So it's a matter of pivoting this up over the top of those cables, making sure we don't snag any. And that looks good to me. Just bring this around a little bit further so you can see the screw hole. And ideally, to allow me to actually get a screwdriver to it, we are taking an M3x10 screw. And put that in like so. It doesn't need to be too tight, just to make sure nothing falls off. And here we have a completed Nextruder assembly. Let's remove the dog hairs, and we're good to go. And finally, we are going to plug everything into the back of the printer and tidy things up there. So the cable's routing like so, going through this left-hand grommet at the top of the xBuddy enclosure. It needs to come down through here, and we need to make sure that that stretches as far as we possibly can. This picture, I think, is very optimistic. I don't think, no matter how you route the cables, I don't think it has so much length that it can just curl up like this and have a generous section available at the end, because it needs to plug in here. I think in reality, you'll find that it just meets that. And you may have struggle a little bit to plug it in, but yeah, I think this is very optimistic, their diagram. Plug that cable in there like so, and then we can actually finally cinch up some of these cable ties up the side here, and then we're done.
Mr. T! Oh! Look who it is! Look! It's a funny oven glove guy. Hello, Mr. T. How are you today? Would you like me to bite you under schnozzle? No? Okay. Okay, you want to take me? Ow, ow, ow. Ow! Oh no! Oh no!
It's now all about routing these cables in. The cables come in through the back of the printer here and needs to go in here, but as you can see, this grommet has already come loose. There's a lot of cables going in a very small hole, and this is going to be kind of tricky. So I think what I'll do first is take this, stretch the grommet and put that through, put this through here, and then I can reseat the grommet in that hole. It's very optimistic to think that was going to get through that grommet whilst it was seated. There's a big connector. Just stretching all the cable through. Now, put it sideways down through that hole. really optimistic, thinking it's all going to fit easily through these tiny holes. But that's it. We just about have the length we need to come down and plug it in down here. Let's get that grommet back in place. I have a feeling it's going to keep popping out. But it's, I don't know, maybe we're lucky. Maybe that's going to stay in place there. So for this last little bit, I need to try and get this connector into that socket there. Hopefully we've got just about enough length here to achieve that. That sounded good. Solid contact in there. And that's nice. And the final thing we need to be doing is to try and route some of these cables through the zip ties that we've already got in place here. Now, we've not got an awful lot of length left on that one, but we'll do what we can. We don't want the zip tie going through straight through the middle of it like that. What else have we got here? Just going to help keep things out of the way a little bit. So I'm going to leave this zip tie undone for the moment because we need to have a little play left in these cables for when we need to get plugs into these little connectors at the top here, which we may still need to do. There's a few down here as well. So let's just leave those as is, and I can cut them off later, because again, we may want to tighten them up a little bit further than that. But anyway, that's the Nextruder fully assembled, connected, wired up. Crikey, that took longer than expected, but finally the print head is fully assembled and connected up. If you enjoyed watching me struggle with screws and wires, please give it a like or leave a comment. The feedback really helps me keep going. And if you'd like to see more building, coding, or general technical tinkering, why not hit subscribe? Next time, I'll be starting to build out the case for the printer and the various components that go with that. Come back for more screwing around. And as always, thanks for watching.
Oh, Mr. T, there's not much space in here, Babs. There's not much space in here, Mr. T, I know. We've got all the recording equipment up. Oh, Mr. T. Mr. T.